you, and welcome back to Governance Week 2026 as we continue with day 2 here on our theme of governance in a volatile world. We started this morning with a really dynamic presentation from Karrian Pereira, one of our directors, I'm very proud to say, and a senior attorney at law out of Barbados, who really gave some very provocative questions and scenarios for us to consider as we examine whether our governance model is currently fit for the volatile world we inhabit today. As we move to our first panel, however, the issue of profit with purpose. This is something that has engaged the minds and attention of a lot of people for several years now. So this panel is going to focus specifically, as we live in a volatile world, with this question of profit with purpose, balancing shareholder value and stakeholder expectations. We have 3 panelists, all ladies. We have Sooknarine from Trinidad and Tobago, Dr. Karrian Hepburn-Malcolm from Jamaica, and Ronaele Dathorne-Bayrd from PwC Barbados. And our moderator is someone who is very new to us. We met her here in Suriname. I'm so pleased that she's agreed to take on this challenge and serve as our moderator today for this first panel discussion on day 2. So I will introduce her now very briefly and then hand over the panel so that she could introduce her panelists. To remind everyone, we are just doing a summary of the introduction because you would have all received the agenda with their detailed profiles. And I tell you, we have some very accomplished people with very long profiles. So it is worth your while to take time to review it. So I will now introduce Soraya. Soraya Jiawan-Nanan is the founder and chief executive officer of International Contracting and Procurement Solutions, NV, which is a Suriname-based company established in 2022. Operating in Suriname and across the region, the ICPS, which is the acronym for her company, specializes in contract management, mechanical and civil engineering, procurement, and the supply and construction of goods and infrastructure for the industrial, construction, and mining sectors. Under her leadership, the company has successfully executed several major projects, including the supply of 21 galvanized panel bridges for a regional infrastructure development project, the delivery of a ferry pontoon, and Soraya, you may want to explain to us what that is, as well as pipeline welding services for the oil and gas industry, among many others. Soraya began her professional career in 2004 with BHP Billiton in Suriname, where she worked in the health, safety, and environment and quality for very, very much apt for this morning's panel discussion. In 2007, she relocated to the Netherlands and joined a company in Rotterdam that I will not try to pronounce, serving as team leader for their environmental department before she returned to live in Suriname. It was a pleasure to meet you, Soraya, and we are very happy to have you here for Governance Week. I now hand over this panel to you.
Thank you, Kamla. Thank you. Indeed, good afternoon, everyone. It's my pleasure to welcome you to this session of the Governance Week. And indeed, as Kamla mentioned, it's my first time participating in this Governance Week. So thank you, Kamla, and the team of CCGI for this opportunity. Today's discussions focuses on a topic that is both timely and increasingly relevant. We're going to have it on profit with purpose, balancing shareholder value and stakeholder expectations. For decades, businesses' success was largely measured by one indicator, that was financial performance and returns to shareholder. But today, however, companies operate in a world where customers, employees, investors, regulators, and communities all expect businesses to create value beyond profit alone. The question is no longer whether companies should be profitable. They absolutely should. The question is how businesses can achieve sustainable profitability while also meeting the expectations of many stakeholders who contribute to and are affected by their success. Can purpose and profit truly reinforce one another? Where do difficult trade-offs arise? And what does governance look like when balancing these competing priorities? This topic is especially relevant within the Caribbean because businesses operate in relatively small, interconnected economies where corporate actions have immediate social and economic impacts. There are some important questions and remarks we hope to explore during today's discussion. And I'm privileged to be joined by an outstanding panel of experts from different Caribbean economies who will each bring unique perspectives from businesses, governance, finance, and leadership. Thank you all for being here. I want to start introducing the panel of today with Ria Sooknarine. She is a sustainability and HSE leader with over 25 years of combined experience in occupational health and hygiene, safety and health, quality management, and sustainability ESG strategy. She specializes in designing and improving integrated OSH management systems aligned with international standards and best practices, translating complex regulatory and ESG frameworks into practical performance-driven solutions that strengthen governance, resilience, and long-term value creation. Ria currently leads sustainability ESG, health, safety, and environmental initiatives at the UNIPED, where she integrates ESG principles into operational decisions, making risk management, compliance system, and corporate strategy. Welcome, Ria, to this panel. As I move on to Dr. Karen Hepburn-Malcolm, she is a respected financial services executive leadership strategist, speaker, author, and wealth management professional with more than 2 decades of experience across Jamaica and Trinidad and Tobago. She currently serves as Vice President Wealth Distribution and Revenue Strategy at VM Wealth Management, where she leads initiative focuses on client growth, revenue and optimization, wealth distribution, and strategic relationship management. She's also the author of the memoir Discovering Purpose, which chronicles her personal and professional journey of faith, resilience, and leadership. A sought-after keynote speaker, panelist, and facilitator, she has delivered presentations on leadership, wealth creation, women's empowerment, governance, financial inclusion, sales excellence, and personal development. Wow, a lot of experiences. Her work distinguished by commitment to integrity service and helping individuals and organizations achieve sustainable success. Welcome, Dr. Hepburn, to this panel discussion as well. And last but not least, we have from Barbados, Ronaele Dathorne-Bayrd. I hope I've pronounced the name well, Ronaele. She's a partner of the PwC East Caribbean firm based in Barbados. She is the tax and legal service leader for the Caribbean region and the governance and sustainability leader for the East Caribbean firm. She's an attorney at law, a fellow of the Governance Institute of Canada, and holds an LLM Masters in Corporate and Commercial Law with an emphasis on corporate governance. She has acted for local and regional and international clients from interceptions throughout the startup period and into life of entity. She has a wealth experience in structuring incorporation, external registration, redomiciliation, and dissolution proceeding, as well as in the sale, restructuring, and amalgamation of local, regional, and international entities. She often advises directors and shareholders on rights, duties, obligations, and corporate regulations, practice and procedures, including those regarding dividend and capital adjustment matters, board and shareholder considerations, and the creation and transfer of equity interest. Her experience also includes advising numerous multinational clients on matters concerning the creation, restructuring, and operation of Barbados corporate entities, including classes of shares and the rights attached thereto, mergers and acquisitions, debt and equity, intergroup financing, and cross-border transactions. Welcome, Ronaele, to this panel as well. To set the stage, I like to begin with a broad question for each of our panelists. When you hear the phrase profit with purpose, what does it mean to you, and why do you believe this conversation is particularly important for businesses today? Who wants to go first? Ria?
So what we'd like is for each of the panelists to share their opening thoughts, starting
Yeah,
with Ria, and then Karrian, and then Ronaele, and then you can ask more questions. Yeah?
great.
So
Yeah.
let's start with Ria.
Sure. So for me, profit with the purpose means creating commercial value and ensuring stakeholder trust.
Right. So Ria, you can continue with your thoughts that you would have prepared for today.
Okay. So good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Soraya, for the introduction, and thank you to CCGI for the invitation to be part of the governance of the Private Sector Forum. So when we hear the word governance, the first thing that often comes to mind are board papers, policies, audits, approvals, and compliance. And yes, these are important as they create the foundation for the organization's structure, discipline, and accountability. But governance is also much more practical than that. It influences the quality of decisions we make when business pressures intensify, when costs are rising, supply chains are uncertain, customer expectations are shifting, climate risks are more visible, and businesses are being asked to show not only what they earn, but how they earn it. For the private sector, particularly in Trinidad and Tobago and the wider Caribbean, that is particularly important. We operate in small, connected economies where business decisions are felt quickly. They affect a wide range of stakeholders, from employees, customers, contractors, communities, regulators, suppliers, investors, and the environment. In Unipet's context, a decision made at leadership level can quickly be felt at a service station, on a fuel delivery route, by a contractor, or by a customer who depends on a reliable service. Businesses exist to create a value, and making a profit is part of that value. A business that is not financially sound cannot invest, it cannot hire people, it can't innovate or pay suppliers, support communities, or remain competitive. Shareholders are right to expect performance, growth, risk management, resilience, and return on investment. The challenge is how we pursue profit in a way that is responsible, sustainable, and trusted. This balance is quite practical in Unipet. Our operations are vast and span from fuel, wholesale and retail, fuel distribution, service stations, convenience retail, commercial fuel, logistics, fintech, and emerging renewable energy initiatives. Our operations support mobility, business continuity, convenience, and access to energy. We are part of the everyday infrastructure that keeps people and businesses moving. And this means that governance cannot sit only at a policy level alone. It must show up in how we serve customers, how we manage operational risk, protect our people, work with contractors and suppliers, support communities, and prepare for changes in energy and mobility. For us, performance and responsibility have to move together. Profit with purpose, therefore, is not a choice between shareholder value and stakeholder expectations. These two are connected. A company earns trust through the way it manages risk, treats people, serves customers, protects the environment, and contributes to society. That trust becomes part of the company's value. A business that compromises on safety may see a short-term saving, but it exposes people and operations to risk that could have been avoided or controlled. A business that ignores environmental responsibility may protect its margin today, but its license to operate will eventually become compromised over time. A business that does not engage with employees, customers, or communities may achieve short-term performance, but will ultimately erode confidence and stakeholder support over time. And this is where good governance keeps the organization disciplined. It ensures that decisions are not driven solely on cost, convenience, or short-term returns, but are also informed by risk, ethics, quality, safety, compliance, stakeholder impact, and long-term relevance. In an organization like Unipat, for instance, that means integrating sustainability, ESG, HSC, risk, compliance, and governance thinking into the way work is planned and managed. And this applies across the entire business and throughout the entire supply chain. In the renewable energy and solar initiatives in Unipat, good governance helps us think about long-term resilience. Our sustainability work currently include renewable energy installations, EV charging, solar projects, waste reduction, occupational safety and health, stakeholder engagement, and community partnerships. And these initiatives reflect the reality that energy companies must prepare for a changing market while continuing to serve today's needs safely and reliably. In that vein, it would be remiss of me not to mention that Unipat was the first company in Trinidad and Tobago to join the United Nations Global Compact. And that commitment is relevant to this discussion because the UN Global Compact is built around principles on human rights, labor, environment, and anti-corruption. From a governance perspective, those principles have to be translated into how we manage risk, select and oversee contractors, protect workers, engage suppliers, and prevent unethical conduct, report honestly, and make decisions that affect communities and the environment. It brings ESG back to a very practical point that responsible business must be visible in systems, behavior, and accountability. More recently, Unipat was awarded the 2026 Europe CHAM Sustainability Champion Award. And for us, that recognition was significant because it acknowledged the work being done to make our ESG practices more resilient across the organization. This recognition now creates a responsibility to keep improving, to be more consistent, and to ensure that sustainability is embedded in how the business operates. And that is an important point because values and purpose have to be managed. They need ownership, measures, evidence, and review. They must show up in budgets, procurement criteria, risk assessments, KPIs, training plans, project approvals, audits, and management discussions. Otherwise, they remain well-intended words on a policy document. From my perspective, there are three practical lessons for governance leaders. First, purpose must be translated into business decisions. It should influence how capital is allocated, how risks are assessed, how people are protected, and how performance is measured. Second, stakeholder engagement must be genuine and practical. The people connected to the business, like employees, customers, regulators, and so on, they often notice problems or opportunities early before they show up in documented reports. Good governance means actively listening to these perspectives and taking clear, consistent action based on the feedback. Third, resilience must be treated as a business priority. In the Caribbean, we know that volatility is evident. We know what it looks like. Climate events, flooding, energy transition, pressures, cost escalation, supply disruption, cyber risks, and regulatory scrutiny can all affect business continuity. Good governance must help organizations prepare, adapt, and respond before issues become crises. So when I think about profit with purpose, I see it as a practical discipline. Profit gives a company the capacity to grow, to employ, to invest, to innovate, and to serve. Purpose gives direction to those decisions, and governance keeps both accountable. For the private sector, the future will require companies to be financially sound while maintaining trust, upholding safety and ethical standards, remaining adaptable, and contributing to communities in which they operate. So the question for us now is simple but important. Are we creating value in a way that people can trust? If we can answer that question honestly through our decisions, our systems, and our results, then profit and purpose are not competing ideas. They become part of the same responsibility. And that, for me, is the future of the private sector governance in the Caribbean. Thanks.
Thank you, Ria, for sharing your thoughts. Moving forward to Dr. Karrian. Karrian, maybe you want to share your
Thank
thoughts with
you.
us?
Sure. Thank you, Soraya. When I think about governance, I try to simplify it, especially when I think of explaining it to my team members, to my staff, because it's one of those all-encompassing words that means that somebody's watching, somebody's checking. You think of compliance. But if I had to really simplify it, I would say that governance simply speaks to who makes the decisions, who approves them, who checks them, and who is accountable if things go wrong. And to bring it closer to home, having been in the wealth management business, both in Trinidad and Tobago, Jamaica and other islands, Cayman, Guyana, etc., it distills to a couple things. We look at profitability, is what we're doing, is it ethical? Is it compliant? Is it risk aware? Is it transparent? And is it sustainable? So I am the vice president of wealth distribution and revenue strategy at VM Wealth Management Limited. And that's a subsidiary of a group in Jamaica called the VM Group. So the VM Group is over 147 years old. And so as you can imagine, for a group like that to be around that long, it's built on trust. It's a household name here in Jamaica. And as a matter of fact, I've had the opportunity to work with at least 4 companies who are over 100 years old. And I realize at the heart of what they do is the fact that their reputation has to be able to withstand the different, tests of time, the different risks, and then their name needs to resonate with their consumers, with the public in a positive way for them to be able to endure. And so I would say when you think about governance in a very practical way, it actually boils down to culture. So while yes, the name and the reputation of the company is one thing, the reality is that it's the people who are in the business that are doing. They are the action verbs, in governance and compliance. And so it means that leadership has to set the tone. And it means that the systems and processes, which are meant to protect the people and the business, has to be set up in a way that encourages a culture of governance. And I know in banking, we like to tout compliance a lot. But as we said, governance is a little bit more than compliance. It's ensuring that there are checks and balances. It's ensuring that there is continuous training. It's ensuring that the mindset of the people in the business, they're very risk aware and they're able to think through the implications of every decision, whether you're on or off the job, right? So, to keep it really crisp, in the business, we look at when we do a transaction, is the deal profitable? Is the risk properly understood? Does it align with our strategy? Was it approved at the right level? Were the clients, regulators, shareholders, and the VM brand protected? And again, to my previous point, you realize that in order to get the correct answer to all those questions, it means that everybody in the organization needs to be on the same page. So it absolutely starts with our people, and it's absolutely steeped in the culture of the organization. So that's my synopsis, my heart around governance.
Thank you, Dr. Karen. And then moving on to our last panelist for sharing her thoughts, Ronaele.
Thanks, Soraya. And thank you to you and my fellow panelists for your initial thoughts. Unfortunately, coming up last, I'll probably echo their thoughts to a large extent, but I think reinforcement is good as part of this learning experience for all of us. Thank you also to Kamla and the CCGI for including me again in this year's conference. So good afternoon again, everyone. I think when this topic was shared with me, the first thing that came to mind is that we're really having this conversation at a time when I think governance is under pressure and it's being tested as to the value it brings. It's being tested in ways that I think are unprecedented, because I think our generation or generations, we're living through a period that really is unprecedented in terms of the level of volatility, the disruption, the accelerating change that we're experiencing. And all of this really is deeply consequential for our Caribbean region. So across the Caribbean and globally, boards are navigating in an environment that really is creating a level of uncertainty that is unprecedented. So the forces that are shaping that environment, we're all too aware that the technological advancements every day, there's a new AI agent that is changing the way we do everything. The climate risk that is all too real for our Caribbean territories, and the geopolitical uncertainty that is constantly shifting our access to resources, our value chains, everything about the way we do business. And then there's the fact that our close-knit Caribbean societies, there are those, shifting societal expectations as to what those who hold the economic power, being our organizations, what it is they need to be bringing to the table to show that they are willing to drive profit, but having a purpose and doing so in a way that is responsible. So all of those things, I think, are more interconnected than ever. And I think that sort of echoes the thoughts that my fellow panelists have already shared. So just to give a little bit more context about my experience in governance, unlike these are the very experienced ladies who are work with a specific organization. My role for the last almost 20 years has been working with boards across the region, supporting boards with understanding the benefits of and understanding how to create a governance framework that is fit for purpose, that is truly implemented, and that has the necessary impact. And as part of that, my governance and sustainability role speaks to the societal and environmental impact that our boards have. So that's the part of my role within PwC as a professional services firm that I am passionate about, and that I've really had the opportunity to work with boards across the region that I think have gone on and continue to do the work necessary to have the type of impact that we're speaking about today. So that impact really goes to the core of, I don't think the question anymore is whether our organizations should pursue shareholder value or respond to stakeholder expectations. I think we've moved on from that debate to a great extent. The real question is, how do our organizations, led by our boards, deliver sustainable value in a way that is still commercially sound, that is strategically disciplined, and that within our societies, they remain credible? And doing all of that at the same time, I think, is a real challenge, but one that we can overcome. So, I think if it's one initial insight I would like to share is that, emphasize, is that profit and purpose can really only be balanced through strong but very intentional governance. Governance is what brings structure to complexity. And now more than ever, that's vital in this very dynamic, very challenging environment we're operating in. It's what connects strategy to execution. It connects ambition to accountability. And it allows our boards to navigate competing priorities without losing clarity of the direction that they want to take the organization in. And I think that without that foundation, you have a situation where purpose can easily become disconnected from decision-making. It becomes something that's articulated in strategy documents, but it doesn't then have the ability to really be reflected in how key steps are taken, how capital is allocated, how risk is managed, and such other fundamentals. So at the same time, profit can become overly short-term though. It can be driven by immediate pressures rather than long-term strategic resilience. And I think our panelists already touched on some of that this morning. But when, on the flip side, governance is working effectively, it really enables boards to integrate those considerations into their strategy and then have a forward-looking approach that is looking to the medium and the long term, not just the short-term value creation. It allows boards to make very deliberate choices about where there need to be trade-offs, how to align strategy with stakeholder expectations. And by stakeholders, we're talking about that much wider stakeholder group, and how to ensure that value creation is sustainable in the long run. But I think the reality, though, is that we're seeing across the boardrooms, certainly with the boards that my team and I continue to work with, is that because the demands have expanded so significantly, those are often outpacing the way governance is structured. So we have some catching up to do. We have to move strategically and quickly to keep pace with the level of change that we're experiencing. Today's board agenda, for example, it realistically needs to include not only traditional financial oversight, but key metrics, key areas to now be overseen by boards are digital transformation, sustainability, talent, culture, and the broader societal impact that the organization has. And these are not isolated. They intersect in ways that directly influence strategy and as such, long-term performance. But I think that the challenge we face is that in many of our organizations, we're seeing governance processes that are still reflecting an earlier context or an earlier concept of what good governance is. Boards are often still, unfortunately, dealing with very highly detailed and very fragmented reporting. They're dealing with large volumes of data that don't necessarily translate into the type of insight that allows them to provide the right level of oversight. And the discussions, to some extent, are still focusing more on monitoring activity than on evaluating what are the outcomes of those activities, what is the impact of each of those on our strategy and on our sustainable goals. And those things, I think we have to very urgently shift the way we're thinking and the way we're embracing governance in our current environment to make it relevant and make it a very vital part of how we're going to succeed in this environment. So that catch up that I think we have to do, it creates, it's a risk. It's subtle, but it's really important. Boards, I think, are addressing the right issues, but not always in a way that enables them to think in an integrated manner and in a very forward-looking manner that impacts those forward-looking decisions, right? And so that is a concern I have, and these discussions that we have as part of Governance Week are so vital to make sure that we're staying relevant and that we're keeping governance relevant. So that our Caribbean organizations can keep pace in this environment. And when you don't have that catch up and that relevance continuing to develop over time, that's what then has a negative impact on our ability to balance profit and purpose, which I think is the main focus of our discussion as part of this panel, right? If we don't allow governance to keep pace, then our organizations are going to struggle to understand how to balance profit and purpose in this environment. And it's not because there isn't the lack of will or a lack of intent. We just have to focus on the alignment that's necessary to allow us to keep that kind of pace. So we have to go just from oversight to active governance. And I'll share, as part of our discussion, a few more thoughts on that as we continue with this session. Thank you.
Thank you, Ronaele. As mentioned actually by all of the panelists, corporate governance and transparency is very important in today's business environment. It's no longer just about compliance. It has become a competitive advantage. Investors, customers, employees, and regulators increasingly expect organizations to demonstrate ethical leadership, transparency, accountability, and strong anti-corruption practices. In smaller economies, such as in many Caribbean, these expectations can be more challenging to meet. Close personal and business relationships are common and can sometimes create perceptions of conflicts of interest, even where there is no actual conflict existing. This makes robust governance practices even more important for maintaining public trust and investors' confidence. So, good governance is often described as the foundation of sustainable business success. In the context of smaller Caribbean economies, where personal and professional networks fluently overlap, what governance practices have proven more effective in strengthening transparency, managing conflicts of interest, and maintaining stakeholders' trust? From your perspective, Ronaele, within several organizations, how can boards foster a culture where ethics and accountabilities are embedded in decision making rather than treated as a compliance requirement?
The value
Ronaele?
system, yes, the value system of the board and the purpose of the organization obviously are fundamental to ensuring that the right ethical behavior exists at the most senior level on that governance body as part of the organization. But I think that the shift that I was alluding to earlier also requires then that there's a shift from that passive oversight to that active governance. And that active governance speaks to the core of the activity of the board being founded in ethical behavior. And that starts with a clear understanding of what the role of the board is. You know, it's not there to manage execution. The responsibility really is to shape the direction of the organization. And if those values don't exist at the board level, it is impossible to have that form part of the organization's value system and its purpose. You know, the board then uses that as a platform to test the robustness of strategy and to ensure that what is being pursued is going to create meaningful value and not just for one group of stakeholders, but for that wider group of stakeholders of the organization.
I would add, Soraya, that this is where training and reinforcement of the ways that the conflict of interest harm the board and harm the reputation of the institution becomes necessary. It means having training that demonstrate real life cases of where when conflicts of interest are unearthed, the way it damages the board members' personal reputation and the way that it throws the reputation of the company, you know, into a whirlwind, onto the front of newspapers. So, you know, there's publicity for the wrong reason. So as you said, you know, in island states, in Caribbean countries where it's definitely less than 6 degrees of separation, it becomes even more important to emphasize the importance of declaring, you know, where there may be connections or conflicts, and explaining to board members what their options are in those cases, whether it be recusing themselves from certain decisions, you know, including declaring the state of the relationship. But as I said, at the heart of it, ensuring that, well, one, that they sign to an understanding of the implications if it's uncovered without their declaration, and two, a thorough explanation of what's at risk for themselves, them, the board member, as an individual, the board, and the company.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Karrian. So technology is part of this as well. It's very important. How do you think technology and digital reporting and stronger disclosure practices can enhance corporate governance? Ria, maybe you want to answer this question?
Sure. I think technology, when used responsibly, it can have a positive impact in the company. It can help with data management, creating information to board in digestible chunks so that they can easily have an idea on how the business is operating while maintaining a good ethical and standpoint and showing good governance as well. I think with technology, you must have clear processes in place to ensure that it's managed well. For instance, with the use of AI, there are a lot of risks where you would find employees uploading sensitive company information on the AI and asking to generate particular responses. So I think often employees are not familiar with the risks of how that information can be used negatively, so the data can be sold and so on. So you have a AI and ethics policy available to help inform the employees on what the consequences may be and how to use the tool responsibly. So I think that's a really good foundation where you start off with defining what the clear expectations are, and how to use the technologies ethically and responsibly.
Thank you. Thank you, Ria.
If I could just add a thought to that, thinking about the challenges that our boards are facing. I mean, honestly, it's somewhat overwhelming when you think about the digital landscape and the impact it is having on every organization, every industry. And I think I would just flag that our boards also need to be cautious about their role in understanding and insisting a level of accountability from their management teams, their executive teams, in setting the right parameters to embrace every opportunity that technology presents while managing every risk that technology presents, because I think we're 50-50 there. There are as many risks as there are opportunities, but understanding that their role is not to micromanage that process. Their role is to ensure that they are receiving the necessary information from their executive teams to clearly understand what the impact of this technology is on the strategy that they have tasked management with implementing. And that strategy is constantly going to have to be revisited. It is constantly going to have to be shifting in the event that it needs to be responsive to the constant change that we're experiencing, but that their role is not to micromanage, has this happened by this date? You need to assume you hold your executive team accountable for whether deadlines are met or not, and you ask for explanations, but that ultimately as a board, your responsibility is to get information in a format and in a manner, and a timely manner, that helps you to understand what is the impact on our value system, what is the impact on our overall strategy, and therein insist that if necessary changes be made so that we are benefiting as much as possible while managing the risks as much as possible. Because if we're not careful, we can get caught in the minutia, and that is not the role of the board. The board needs to understand what is the impact of opportunities and risks on the strategy and make the changes as necessary. I think what governance does, especially in a volatile environment, if there is a sound governance framework and foundation upon which a board is built and is operating, it allows a board the safety and the structure to be agile. And agility in this environment is vital. So just to remind us that, the role of the board really needs to be, what is the impact of all of this on our strategy? This is where we need you to course correct in certain situations. And to be able to do that, this is the information we need and the format we need it in.
Yeah. But on the other hand, businesses are embracing the digital transformation by investing in artificial intelligence, automation, digital banking, e-commerce, social media, you name it. to improve efficiency, enhance customer experience, and remain competitive in an increasingly global marketplace. But at the same time, the stakeholders are expecting concerns about job displacements, data privacy, cybersecurity, and unequal access to technology. Companies therefore face dual challenges. On one side, modernizing their operations while investing and reskilling their workforce and ensuring that no one is left behind. So, with digital transformation, which is no longer an option, it's essential in remaining competitive. Yet it also raises important questions about the impact on employees, customers, and society. How do you see this challenge unfolding from your point of view? Who wants to answer this question?
Okay, I'll go first. So what I'll say, Soraya, is that as technology and conveniences evolve, so do the challenges and risks. And
Exactly.
if we want to think in a very rudimentary fashion, when back in the day when people used to ride horses, yes, let's say a horse crashing into a building or a person, yes, that could have been harmful, but more so now when you think about how transportation has evolved, right? When you think of, the speed that a car can go, or you think of the size of a semi-truck, or, when you think of how that has evolved, it's more convenient, it's faster, but there are also different risks that we would have had to adapt to. Similarly, with technology, and with social media, it offers many, many benefits and many, many conveniences. But again, it means that we have to make sure that we have mitigating both policies, procedures, and systems and practices to help protect us and to help protect our employees and our businesses. And Ria mentioned it earlier when she spoke about, the fact that employees and board members might be tempted to upload sensitive documents to AI, to summarize it, to give insights, to give a fresh perspective. But of course, the risk is that that document could end up in places you didn't intend for it. Also, when you think about technology, I also thought about the fact that many times, there's a blurred line between personal use and work use, and people end up using both devices and platforms in ways that's not necessarily in the best interest of the organization. And last but not least, social media. So, they say once you put something out there, it's very hard to pull it back. There's a digital footprint. Somebody could have shot saved it. Somebody could have recorded it. You also sometimes lose control of the narrative, what you intended to communicate, it's received differently. Coming out of that is the whole cancel culture and the keyboard warriors. People are just so much bolder and braver and meaner and more explicit, when they are commenting or sharing their thoughts online as opposed to face. So from a governance perspective, as I said before, it means that our policies need to be up to date, right? Again, we have to make sure that the necessary training occurs for staff, for board members, in terms of what the social media policy is, what they're allowed to post, what they're allowed to share, who is allowed to communicate via the official platforms, and so on. So as I said, anything that is convenient, advanced, and powerful is all of those things for good and for bad. So it's up to us to ensure that we put in the guardrails to protect us and our organizations as best as possible.
Yeah, but
Absolutely.
the development is moving so fast. And are we fast enough in the businesses to adapt those developments and be prepared for the risk it's bringing along?
Yeah, just to pick up on a point that Karrian made in terms of AI specifically, that all of the other digital platforms and risks and opportunities, But thinking about AI specifically, the risks and opportunities attached to how quickly that space is advancing is something that we have to keep an extremely, extremely close eye on. Now, I am not for 1 second underestimating the opportunities that exist for efficiency that AI tools can bring, but I am extremely vocal generally within my organization and out as to the need for us to manage the risks associated with how quickly can we upskill our people to ensure that their talents are being used in ways that are complementary to. So our approach to technology is that we are human-led and tech-empowered.
Mhm.
We need to be empowered by these tools, but we remain the leaders of our organization, from the most junior to the most senior. And another part of that equation that we are very heavily focused on is ensuring that you balance that, especially at the more junior levels. We're all, I think, on this panel, a certain vintage, where, at least we have come through our organizations having to develop certain tools, both technical and softer skills. And if we're not careful within our organizations throughout the region, we could do our more junior team members a disservice if they don't have the opportunity to develop those technical skills because things are being done too easily for them. So it's something we have to be very cautious of because we don't want to disadvantage them from that perspective. And we also don't want to lose our humanity, because that goes to the core of our organizations, the core of our value systems, and we have to be very careful that we don't just talk that talk at a board level, but that we ensure that throughout the organization that continues to be a focus.
Yeah. Thank you, Ronaele, for that add. I'm looking at the chat and I see a question from our participant, Rowan. More and more investors, especially younger investors, are not only evaluating companies by their profits, but also on their social and environmental impacts. As a result, what can we in the Caribbean do to have board consider the financial cost of their environmental impacts and also consider including this in their annual financial statements? Ria, maybe you want to give a heads up from your point of view?
Sure. So what can we do to have boards consider the financial costs of the environmental impacts, and including the financial statements? I think that is where the company's risk register comes into play, where they have an appreciation of what the environmental risks may be and the controls that are in place and what more the company needs to do. So whether it may have regulatory implications, the implications can affect people, new contracts, business opportunities, and with regard to the financial, including the financial statements, I think that would already be included there in with regard to if any fines were imposed or any asset damage, integrity damage or so, like insurance costs, for instance. Yeah, I think those would be worth considering. Thanks.
Thanks. Soraya, I would like to ask a question, please, if it's okay.
Yeah, go ahead, Kamla.
All right. I would just like to take the conversation a little further outfield and understand this global context and how we are treating with it in the Caribbean. So I want to start with reminding us that Berg opened Governance Week with us on Sunday. One of the points he made was first to consider whether our governance practices in itself didn't create the volatile world we now live in, right? And one of the things that when you look at the world on the whole, you are seeing more and more organizations getting richer and richer. So we have had organizations hit the $3 billion mark already. But you're seeing people basically struggling paycheck to paycheck in order to meet their quality of life and standards of living. So there has been a real challenge with us understanding and being able to live what it means by balancing profit and purpose. Now, I absolutely love the contribution we've had from our three panelists. You know, Dr. Karrian, I really am impressed, 147 years in Jamaica. That's nice. And as you said, you know, it speaks to what the organization offers, which is why it continues to do well. And Ria's example of UNIPET and the awards that they've won and being part of the UN Global Compact says the same thing. And I know PwC with Ronaele, you guys do a lot of great work in the Caribbean region in terms of helping boards and building their frameworks and understanding how they respond to the environment. But are we looking at how that profitability is actually growing? Have we decided that we are not looking at growth every quarter? Are we measuring performance of organizations against, you know, that financial budget? Because are we also seeing, in fact, I should ask this question, are we also seeing a similar trend in the region where we have organizations that are still very much focused on profits? And so we have organizations growing and posting very healthy profit lines, but, you know, the organization is not as contributing to the kind of governance that would help build that middle class and the ability for people on the whole to have a better quality of life. Karrian, maybe we'll start with you on that, because I know you have a very regional perspective, having worked in different countries here in the region.
All right. So, Kamla, you know, if I were to be very frank, I realize that in the Caribbean, there seems to be a dual perspective. There are some people who are very passionate about governance and, you know, purpose, profit with purpose and ESG. And then you meet another set of people who don't seem to care about it at all. It's fundamentally the bottom line that they care about, you know, if I were to be very frank. So there's a little bit of a hypocrisy, I think, around it sometimes. Obviously, when we're in forums like this, we'll find more like-minded people. But when you go out there and you get in front of the business owners and the company executives and the clients, some care and some don't. But at the end of the day, you know, as leaders and captains of industries, it's our responsibility, you know, being blessed with the opportunity to lead and to influence our organizations and by extension our communities, you know, to set the tone and to ensure that this is something that we model. So with that said, let's say even in the financial space, I know many organizations, you know, struggle with how do we really implement this governance thing beyond compliance and fitting in ESG, considering when you think bank, you don't think environment, and when you think wealth, you don't think environment, but the reality is we are allocators of capital. And so we can start to set the tone by creating funds that support those initiatives, by allocating capital, giving preference to companies that embody, you know, the things that we want to see, you know, funding companies that are doing the right thing. So it's a right thing to do. But I think we still have some work to do in getting everybody to buy into it, and most importantly, live it. You know, to yes, think the dollar sign, think profitability, but to think about the impact that it's having on those around us. And last thing I would say is, in some respects, I feel like the younger generation is doing a better job at holding us accountable when it comes to that kind of responsibility. I see articles and research that suggest that they're adamant about not doing business or not spending their money with companies that embody this profit with a purpose. So that's my 2 cents on it.
Yes. Thank you, Karrian. And Soraya, I want to ask Ronaele a question as well.
Before
Yeah.
you do, Kamala, I would just like to piggyback a little bit on Karrian's comments and going back to Rowan's question. He spoke to the issue of young investors, but the conversation I have with boards, there are very few organizations, that's a reality. There are very few organizations in our region right now who will consider doing the right thing by society and the environment just because it's the right thing to do. Let's be honest with ourselves. That's not the purpose for which many of our profit generating entities exist, right? That being said, when the bottom line is that without really head-on addressing societal and environmental issues, you run the risk of alienating not just young investors, but you're limiting the talent pool from which you can draw. I have had enough conversations with young folks in the younger generation, including my daughter, who is very much focused on civil and environmental engineering as her focus of her career because of this very issue. They want to do their part. They're willing to do the work. And so they are not prepared to give their talents, far less their investment dollars, when they're actually earning, to institutions or organizations that are not prepared to do the right thing. That's one thing. The other side of the equation is also that the reality is if you're not facing these sustainability issues, including building resilience into your organizations, you are directly and immediately having a negative impact on your bottom line. And so it's not just about doing the things that look nice and feel nice and sound nice, but the conversations I have with boards is you have to understand the reality of our situation and not bury your head in the sand. A fundamental part of facing environmental issues is understanding how to build resilience into your business, and resilience of all types. So that's another part of it. And the third part of it, that conversation that I often have, is we know that we are causing the least damage. We know that we are feeling the most impact. But that being said, when we expect our leaders to go onto a global stage and demand the type of compensation and the type of support to which we know we are entitled under the circumstances, I think they really need to be doing that from a place of credibility. And those who have the economic power in our region need to be doing their part so that our leaders can, speak from a place of credibility and know that even though we're doing the least damage, we're doing our part. We're putting in the work irrespective of that. And that, I think, gives us an even more sound platform from which to speak. So your question now, Kamala, sorry.
Yeah, so it's very similar to what you started sharing, Ronaele, because you have worked with a number of organizations across the region, and particularly the PwC survey, which measures some amount of corporate governance practices in the region. Have you seen that there is this awareness among the majority? But I guess the answer is already no, as you have shared.
Yeah, the awareness is there. So we started that survey. It was Barbados only. My little team and I in Barbados started the survey in 2018, and it was at the time only Barbados directors. And Professor Garrett was very supportive of our very first foray into that space. And since then, we've broadened it significantly. My counterparts in a lot of our other territories in the region have been supportive of us expanding it. So we now cover 6, I think, territories, Bermuda down to Trinidad. And yes, more and more every year, the responses reinforce the fact that we know what we need to do. We know what we need to do. We know what is beneficial to organizations. We speak every year about the value of diversity, and the responses are always the same. Oh, yes, absolutely. Diversity brings immense values to our organization. We absolutely know we have to do our part in terms of social and environmental responsibility. But is that translating? And the next question will be, what are you actually doing well?
Yes.
Not enough.
Yes.
So we accept what we know what we need to do. We know the benefits, but we're suffering from a bit of implementation deficit. That was again demonstrated in our results this year.
Yes. Is it related as well, Ronaele, to maybe having the measurements that would demonstrate, as you say, when you ask for, so what are you doing? Are we
what
picking
gets
up
measured gets done?
Yeah, that's right.
What gets measured gets done. And, as the last couple of decades have shown, our Jamaica organizations, I always cite Grace Kennedy as my starting point. When I started my journey into this space 20 years ago and focused for my own paper on governance, Grace Kennedy was really the organization that set the tone in the region, right? And so Jamaica has really continued to lead the way in that space, and they're measuring more than anybody else. Certainly when it comes to governance. The environmental, we all still have a long way to go. And I don't know how much traction we're going to get in the short term, because the reality is unless you're in that value chain where you're getting caught by S1 and S2, it's very difficult unless we implement something locally. It's not going to be voluntary. So it remains to be seen how our accounting bodies speak to those sustainability standards and to what extent we at least do something that's fit for purpose. The other extreme is us trying to do a cookie cutter that is not going to add value, because we are not in the same space as EU organizations. We have to be realistic about where we are, what we want to achieve, and doing this in a way that is not prohibitive and not detrimental to organizations, but do something. We need to do something.
Yes, yes. So, but I also want to look at another fundamental concept, and I want to bring this to Ria now. And Ria, it might be a little bit unfair to you, but I'm still going to present this to you, okay? And which is this. So traditionally, we have looked at growth of organizations as constant, and it just keeps growing. And we see, as I said earlier, it's now growing into the trillions. But there's this new economic model that was introduced. It's called the donut economy. I think it was Rayworth from the UK who came up with this model within the last few years. And she came up with it after really looking at the 9 planetary boundaries and the fact that, the Earth is under such threat. So she came up with this economic model that spoke about that core being what is sustainable and what really works for the organization. And she says that there should be a ceiling of growth. She says in the natural world, a tree grows only so much. And when it becomes huge, it really stays around that size for long. But we don't model that with our businesses. So I wanted to ask you, and I will ask you specific to your experience with Unipet, because I'm not sure if, there's more than that. When you have to advise the board about your sustainability practices, do you have models like this in consideration in terms of not just Unipet's growth overall, but managing it in such a way that it's taken along the stakeholders who are impacted by what you're doing? How exactly do you guys balance this when you take it to your board in order to get that kind of award-winning performance?
Well, absolutely. So the executive team, they would lead this effort, and they would look at various models and concepts and best practices globally. And our intent is really to execute using proven standards. So Unipet it operates in a traditional gas station model, a service station model. And when you look at what's going on globally, you would see that the customer needs are changing, the expectations are changing, the customers, they want green solutions. They want a vehicle that is not going to hurt the environment. They want something that is more economic. They want a bang for the buck. They're more into EVs, solar solutions. So as a gas station company, we had no choice but to innovate and look at how we can re-strategize and how we can maximize this energy concept. So we can provide energy solutions, not just in the form of fossil fuel, but also in renewable energy, something that is helping to keep the environment more sustainable, that is going to be around when our like 100 years from now, because it's only going to keep getting better. It's going to get greener. We are investing on a lot of digital transformation solutions as well. And with that, it's like balancing 2 sides of a coin, because you're saving a lot of time, you're getting faster outputs, you're getting more reliable information, more agile solutions, as opposed to if you if you don't use the tool, you're going to get left behind, right? So we have no choice but to adopt and adapt quickly and responsibly, and do so while we're keeping the employees aware of what the transition is. We do train them. They are aware of the consequences if we don't adopt these tools, and they have to get on board or they get left behind, essentially. And I think that is important too, so that when we take the information to the board, that they have a good idea of what happens if we don't innovate and move forward and transform into the different avenues.
Thanks, Ria. And Soraya, as I'm here in Suriname, I also wanted to get your perspective a bit, because this is such a very different culture to what we have seen in most of the rest of the region. As much as you share a lot of similarities, Suriname is a culture where there is a true upholding of values that recognizes and honors a lot of the past. So you have an entire section in your town that's a national heritage. And as I shared when I spoke at the energy conference, there's a cathedral here in Suriname that is over 100 years old, that's built entirely with cedar oak. It's just the most amazing cathedral I've seen, and I've seen cathedrals in Europe. So Suriname here has such a deep sense of value and preservation of things that are really worth keeping. And one of the things I also saw at the energy conference was a relatively new product, the use of bamboo to create building materials that will be a lot more green and sustainable, really, really interesting. Now, you've been in the oil and gas sector here in Suriname as well. So can you give us your perspective in terms of, are you seeing businesses here intentionally looking at balancing that profit with purpose? Or are we going to see, since there's going to be a boom in Suriname pretty soon, are we going to see the growth of organizations in such a way that we're going to have huge profitability among organizations, but people who are not touched, who are not able to benefit from it? What are your thoughts?
So I think for a long time, Suriname was mostly based on importing goods. And that's a culture that's created for a while ago, because development was not really stimulated in Suriname. But as the world becomes closer to us in terms of oil and gas, and these values are set, you see the development in Suriname starting from now on. And that's the reason why small business companies are operating, looking especially at ASG, the value of that, and how they can explore their company to be meaningful in the profit of these type of businesses. And I think it's also the reason for that is also because it's a requirement within the oil and gas that you need to have ESG embedded in your company. So it's a must do. Companies in Suriname, they cannot say that we won't invest in the ESG. We need to invest, otherwise you will miss the boat for the development of the oil and gas. So it's very important. And what you see is that businesses rushes at this moment to develop that part within their business. Another struggle we are facing as well is also skilled personnel and the brain drain. But I think it's a Caribbean thing as well. Brain drain, we have structural changes within the Caribbean, is the migration of skilled professionals. Suriname is facing that because of the economical situation. But I think another challenging country is also Guyana, with the development upcoming, and they need a lot of skilled personnel, which is not available in their own country. So you see that businesses therefore face a difficult balancing act in managing labor costs and competitive markets, offering salaries that can retain skilled professionals, and investing in continuous training and workforce development. But at the same time, employees' expectations are evolving as well, beyond compensation and professional increasingly value. Employees are looking for clear career development pathways, work-life balances, which is also another challenge we are facing in Suriname as well, to have these expertise attracted to us. And maybe our panelists can inform us how they deal with keeping talent, how they use to attract talent, develop them, retain the talent. That's the most important, I think, in such a competitive global market, because that's a continuously challenge we have in Suriname. You're training people, you're paying them well, they have a good life balance, but still the market outside is more interesting than the one in Suriname. For whatever reason, people are moving on.
Which I think is a great pity. Suriname is such a lovely country. It's been, quite a great experience interacting with Surinamese here. So, but I guess it is a very common challenge, as you say, in the Caribbean. So Ronaele and Karrian, and maybe she'll ask Ria what keeps her in Trinidad and Tobago. How do we keep our young people and prevent this brain drain?
All right. So I you're right, Soraya. It's one of the problems that Jamaica has been plagued with from as early as the 70s. There was a mass migration of not only our young people, but even mature professionals, intellectuals, based on what was happening politically in the country. And to some extent, I feel like we're still reeling from that. But with that said, I know the subsequent governments have tried to, make the economy and put things in place to encourage education here in Jamaica, as well as set up programs where they visit students enrolled in universities abroad, and they try to enlist them before they graduate, either by funding their tuition, providing scholarships, or promising them jobs in advance, so that they will come back and contribute at least for, let's say, 1 to 3 years. So I know quite a few people who have benefited from that, and in turn the country has benefited from that. And I think the hope is that once they come and they feel all the fuzzies about their country, and you feel very patriotic, you stay. Maybe by then, you find a spouse, you get married, you have a family, and you have roots, and you buy a house. So I think that's been the main plan of the government in trying to bring back the students, because inevitably some of the things that they want to study, it's not necessarily offered in the region. Or they want the prestige of saying they attended this university or that university. And so it's trying to find a way to bring them back. I mean, I myself, there's a little bit of intra-regional brain drain, if you want to call it that, where we do some island hopping. I'm guilty of that. I left Jamaica in 2011, and what was meant to be a 3 to 5 year secondment turned into 12 and a half years in Trinidad. And at the time, Trinidad was particularly attractive to me, because Jamaica was trying to find its way from an economic perspective, but now they're on a path to economic recovery, and Trinidad was doing really well. When you think about oil and gas and some of the developments that were happening there. So as a young person, Trinidad was particularly attractive to me. And I can see where it works the other way, because, as I said, having meant to spend 3 years there, I ended up staying there 12 and a half years. And there was a point when I was confident that I would be retiring in Trinidad. Who knows?
The regional happiness side, we welcome it. No, because that means that we are sharing ideas within the region and building that integration.
Don't feel guilty, Karrian. I'm maybe worse than you, but I don't feel guilty because I see this as my Caribbean, right? So I went I have friends who are family in Jamaica. My father and my husband were actually born in Guyana. I'm born in Grenada. My kids are Bayesian. My husband considers himself Antiguan. Oh, wow. So I'm a full CARICOM. Yeah, I don't, and I'm proud of it, right? And I'm Grenadian by birth, Barbados has been home for 26 years. I went for a year.
Wow. Okay.
26 years, one Antiguan husband and two Bajan children later. I'm still there. But
Wow.
today, I am actually joining you from Grenada. So I am home for a diaspora conference. We are looking to see how those of us who have gained experience outside of Grenada can contribute. It doesn't necessarily, our Prime Minister emphasizes, you don't have to be here to give back and to lend of your skills. And so it's funny that Kamla should pose this question because I'm very much feeling that today. I actually ran away from the conference to join you here, and I'll go back as soon as we're done. But yes, I think we have a lot to give each other within the region, and we have, nobody's coming to save us. We have to help each other and help ourselves. And that means, yes, sharing of our talents, sharing of our resources, and figuring out how to maximize those, because we really cannot do it individually and nobody's coming to help us. So we have to work much better together. And when it comes to the young people, Kamla, it's challenging because, again, the opportunities for the experience, both in terms of study and after, we have to work to create an environment that's conducive to have them think about actually being here. But yes, I think also thinking about how can you, even before you actually physically return, find ways to contribute.
Yes, yes, it is challenging for them because the economy is not all that great. Jobs are hard to find. In Trinidad and Tobago, I could tell you, employment is a real challenge. So there are many things that has to be put in place if we are going to help prevent that brain drain. But Ria, we be asking you.
I think it's a serious conversation to have. If we're looking at young people, their work ethic is different. They they're not interested in traditional roles. Like if I'm looking at my field, it's very hard to find a health and safety professional or somebody in like a HR role, for instance. The young people want to stay at home, they want to work from home. And there are a lot of opportunities overseas, like European companies, they do have work from home opportunities. So I think like a lot of the young people, they're more inclined, they're more gravitated to opportunities like that, as opposed to a corporate role where they have to physically be at a job, So I think there's a lot of factors to consider as well because they tend to be more environmental conscious. So that if a company is based in fossil fuel, they don't want to have any affiliation with that company. They want to have a sense of purpose. They want to feel like they're saving the world. So filling particular types of roles, I see it just getting worse going forward. But definitely they're very interested in digital like software development, applications, like tech, gamification, things like that. So yeah, absolutely.
So as we kind of wrap up our time here with this panel, and Soraya, forgive me, I did take over some of your time, but I'm just so focused on this particular topic of, profitability and purpose. How do we keep those two together? How do we grow our governance in such a way that it really serves everyone in a way that is wholesome? And basically what I am hearing from our panelists is that within the region, there are people who are interested. We have organizations, and there's some examples given here. But I think we really do have a challenge still, because if we are looking to provide the kind of opportunities, for instance, that Ria spoke about, that would really connect with young people and keep everyone engaged, there's a certain amount of spending that is involved. And in order to spend and invest in that technology, you do need to focus on profitability to get that revenue. So we basically, it's a very challenging situation that we are in to try and ensure that it's all working. But, final comments from each of you. Are we likely to win this war? Or are we going to see a couple, billionaires emerging out of the Caribbean, but the world's still pretty much volatile, uncertain, and in a bit of a mess?
I think that if you're looking at profit with a purpose, you need to go back to the company values and consider that in the decision-making process. You know, the company's mission, vision, their values, why are we here, what's our purpose, and have that drive the decision-making process.
Yes, I like that. You know, what are the values that you embody and how does that guide your decisions? Good response, Rita. So, Ronaele, are we likely to win this war?
Well, I would piggyback off of Ria's comment in that I still, based on conversations that I have constantly with boards we support, based on, yes, our feedback from the 2026 survey, I think our boards still do understand that trust, especially in our small, close-knit Caribbean societies, trust is a strategic asset. And what do they need to do to earn and keep that trust? You know, investors are looking, yes, they want performance, but they're also looking for what is the resilience of this organization, given the volatility of our environment. Stakeholders generally, they're looking for, yes, responsibility, and they want to see the bottom line, but they're also looking for credibility. They want to understand, you know, what type of organization is operating in my society? Who am I giving my money to? Who am I lending my talents to? And those societies generally, they're increasingly looking for organizations that have that economic power, looking for us to demonstrate leadership, because we're at a juncture in our evolution as small nations where that is more vital than ever. We cannot rely on governments alone to do it all. And we not only not rely on them to do it all, we need to be stepping up and really taking a fair amount of that load, because we are benefiting from a very wide stakeholder group that we owe a level of responsibility to. So I think the boards that succeed are going to be those that have the ability to align that purpose and performance, because again, we would go back to who is going to be having the earning power, who's going to have the talent to lend to organizations. Younger generations have no tolerance for operating in a manner of years gone by. And I think our organizations are more and more going to recognize that. So yes, Kamala, I am optimistic.
Very good, very good. Karrian, your closing thoughts. Are you also optimistic?
I am optimistic. And I think it starts with a realization that this isn't a corporate responsibility or a governmental responsibility. It actually starts with us individually, a resolve and a passion to make an impact where we are and within our sphere of influence. And also, when we think about the fact that many of us have younger people that we care about, if it's not children, it's nieces, it's nephews, even from a legacy perspective, we want to ensure that, you know, we leave, you know, our community, our country, this world in a way that is sustainable. And the reality is that it's not a war of profit versus purpose. It's finding creative and innovative ways to merge both. You know, so I think if we stop thinking of them as rivals or, you know, extreme opposites, and just think about how we can start to blend them, it feels, I think, more achievable.
I love that. I love that. Thank you, Karrian. So, Soraya, you would have thought quite a bit about profit and purpose as well as you were preparing for this panel. I would appreciate any closing thoughts from you too as we bring the panel to an end.
Yes, Kamla, thank you. So actually, I'm looking at the time, and indeed, we only have 1 minute left. The discussion we had, I encourage our participants to think not only about today's discussion from a perspective of governance, but as mentioned, leadership is also very important, because ultimately balancing shareholder value with stakeholder expectation is not simply a business strategy. It's a leadership challenge that we shape the future competitiveness, resilience, and reputations of our organizations. So, with that being said, I would like to thank our panelists for their valuable contribution and insightful perspective. I also thank you all our participants for your active engagement. Unfortunately, we didn't get a chance to answer or to mention all the questions in the chat. But I think it was a very fruitful and interesting discussion within the several cultures of the Caribbean. So I want to thank you all for this.
Thank you very much, Soraya. You know, on behalf of CCGI, we are happy to have you join us for the first time for Governance Week, and we look forward to seeing more of you in time to come. And of course, to our regular Ronaele. Ronaele, we've not had a Governance Week without you, I think, since we started. So it's always awesome to have your contributions. Ria, it was really nice to have you today for the first time. It's, you know, we are bringing those young voices on board as well, because we need to be very much inclusive and have this dialogue that helps all of us better understand and ensure that our governance is aligned. Dr. Karrian, it was such a pleasure to meet you in Jamaica. Thank you so much for joining us today, because your perspective as well, especially having, you know, been across the region, it helps us to see the value of what we're doing right in some ways and what we can do better, and how as a region we are able to grow stronger and serve our economies better, so that we all have a better quality of life. Thank you all very much. And to our participants who were with us all the while, thank you. It's been quite amazing that we are getting such a good turnout for Governance Week this year. I can promise you, you have a really good panel to come. Next, it is risk, regulation, and reputation, navigating uncertainty in modern corporations. So uncertainty is so much in line with the volatility that we are talking about, and therefore we have three. These are experienced panelists, actually. We have Gail Alex Solomon, Shelley Bend, who would be joining us from Barbados, and Ian John, one of our directors here at CCGI from Trinidad and Tobago, who will be joining us to have a conversation around this topic. And we'll have another first-timer for Governance Week, Terry Manning, joining us from Barbados. Terry is a member of CCGI, and she will be making her first appearance as a moderator for us for Governance Week. So thank you all for staying with us at this time. I'm going to remind you, we really appreciate you taking the time to give your feedback in the survey for us. So ensure that you click on that link that Monique would have shared and give us your feedback, so we can share it with the panelists as well, and we can improve the way we are doing things here at CCGI. So Quantrell, let's do our closing video as we thank our sponsors and then go on a short break. I'm barely here. Right. Thank you, Quantrell. I hope everyone heard the lovely music that accompanied that video from Joshua Regrello on the steel pan. It was very, very soft on my end. I'm not sure why, so we'll try and troubleshoot that while we go on this break. So thank you all. We return at the top of the hour as we continue with Governance Week 2026, Governance in a Volatile World, as we move on to panel 2.